Welcome back, CSA students. Okay, it's Mrs. Anderson. So we are going to talk a little bit about Java and jGrasp. So in the last video, we did this Hello World program. We're going to step back a little bit and just talk about jGrasp and Java a little more. So I have this Amazon website up, right? So here's my shopping cart. If you've ever purchased something off anywhere, and you can see I've got a couple things in my cart and I've got things saved for later. And somewhere in there it's keeping track of all this data, right? Somewhere behind the scenes it's got my cart with this data, and it's got this list saved for later with these prices and these items, and it knows that this is the total. It's done the math to find the subtotal for my cart. And if I take something off this list and I say, yeah, I want to move that to my cart, it's going to take that 1966 and add it to my subtotal. And when I proceed to check out, it's going to check for shipping and handling. It's going to figure out the tax here and add on the tax and give me the total. So something's doing this math behind the scenes, right? So we like to say there's two elements to applications, especially in this visual GUI based world. And one element is the layout of what we see. So Amazon puts their little logo here, and they decide how to lay out items and how to show them and present them to you. And then the back end, so that's called the front end, what we see. The back end refers to who's doing the math with all this. Where is all this data stored? And who's keeping track of, credit card things and all that kind of stuff? Who's handling all that back end stuff that we don't see? So this class that we are doing, APCSA, really we want to get into the back end. So sometimes we'll come to front end, but really very rarely. We want to get to this back end. How do I do that math behind it? And the program we're using to do that is Java. And so that's why, even though this is a GUI window, this output is very flat, right? It's not a pop-up thing. It's not very exciting. But we're going to start with the basics and build up. And we'll try to get some GUI throughout the year. But it is more about that back end. Who's behind the scenes? Okay. So we use the language Java. That is what College Board has chosen. Most universities use it still as introductory languages, and it's still quite prevalent in a lot of applications. So it's a good first language. So looking at programming languages, there's procedural and object-oriented, and you can see that Java falls under object-oriented. So here's some that are procedural that are not object-oriented. So for now, just know that term, start getting comfortable with it, object-oriented. So it gets to do something a little different that these programming languages don't quite do as elegantly. So Python is down here. C is more procedural. And then we also talk about lower level languages. C is very low level. Java's mid-level, Python's high level, and that has to do with how much closer you are to being able to really manipulate things at a low level in the computer with memory allocation or memory management. So C does that well. Once we get up to Python, we can't do that as well, but we can do some other things. We can write the code quickly. It's a little more user-friendly. But it's actually not as efficient as C. And so Java's kind of in between those two, I would say. So maybe not as efficient as C, but not quite as user-friendly as Python is how I would describe it. So, okay, so this is the Java programming language. But in order for the computer to understand it, this, believe it or not, you're saying, I don't really understand any of this, but this kind of looks user-friendly to you. The more you see it, you'll know what it means. So that is really for you, for the programmer to be able to write the program more easily. What the computer needs to make this go to the screen, you probably have guessed, is more something with bytes and bits, right? Zeros and ones. Everything in computers are zeros and ones. You can actually look at the bytecode, or I think Oh, maybe not. I thought we could. Or you might be able to look at it at school. I'm not sure why it's not opening. Edit binary. Oh, look at that. There it is. So look at that gobbledygook. Like, could you imagine writing a program in that? So what the Java compiler does is it takes your program and it turns it into this bytecode so that it can run and produce this output. So you cannot do anything until you've produced bytecode. You can't run a program until you've produced bytecode. So we're never going to go in this class program again, or not class program, dot class program again. We're going to stay in this Java program here. So here's the breakdown of that. You write the source code. We compile it using the Java compiler. It creates this dot class file, and then we can run it, and we can see screen output, or we can do math. Like we saw in the Amazon example. I think the trickiest part for students is this source code is written with this public class command, but the source code has a .java extension. It is no mistake that first program here has to match first program there. So the .java extension is the source code, and the source code is what you write, what the programmer writes. When we compile, and I'll open that again, you'll notice here I've got this program underlined now. This dot class file is the bytecode. So don't confuse this dot class with this class header that you see here for the source code. So dot class is bytecode. That's what we can use to execute, what the Java virtual machine uses to run your program, and .java is the source code, and that is what you write. So it's in this visual again. So Java virtual machine is going to run that bytecode. So we'll talk just a little bit about the IDE, which is what jGrasp is. So Java, I said this was backend, and so if you've ever brought up the terminal or the DOS prompt in Windows, it kind of looks like this, if you've ever seen something like this. So mine is going to be different because I'm on a Mac. A lot of these things you can do with Microsoft Windows, but some of the commands are a little different. I can show them to you in class. But so I can see here is that folder that I was in before. And now I'm in that folder and I can see my programs there. So this terminal window, if I shrink it down almost, I want you to think of that as this bottom window in jGrasp. So jGrasp is an IDE. It is an integrated development environment. And what it integrates, what it puts together, is that terminal window here, and I've kind of ruined that. Now let me move it up. So here's the terminal window, and then up here is simply something like Notepad. So in Windows, it's called Text Edit. So there's a text editor here, and I could just use a text editor. And then over here is your Windows Explorer or File Explorer, right? So it's got your directory file structure. So I can go here, I can go into my folders, and that's what's on this left bar. So I know I've not pieced this together, but that's all an IDE does, is it pulls together things you need to write a program. I need to write source code. I need to store files and see them, and I want to run output and see, or run the program and see the output. So just to kind of show you, this is that terminal window. And again, I just want to see. So when I was here in jGrasp, I'm going to clear these for a minute. When I hit compile, there was this command here, javac-g first program.java. So I'm gonna delete that because I'm going to show you I can create it here. So I can use that same command, java c -g first program.java. So if you notice, I know you saw this class, but the class file is not here. And let me show you that first. Here's the .java. There's no .class file. I deleted it. So I've still got my source code, but I deleted the other. And I can show you, there's my source code. So I can also compile here, java c -g, like that. And it's the same command. So the integrated, the IDE is just making it nice that I can just click a button. If I do ls here, there's that bytecode now. If I go back here and hit refresh, there's that bytecode, and it's because I compiled it here. The IDE makes it nice because I can just hit this and it will compile it. Or I can hit this and it will run it, right? Here's the command to run the program. So again, from here, I can type java first program, and there's my hello world. So you're not going to be expected to pull these things apart. I want you to understand and appreciate this is jGrasp, this IDE, this layout, pulling these pieces together. Java is the thing that's turning this source code into bytecode. It's separate. I don't need jGrasp to do that. I can use another IDE. I didn't need jGrasp at all when I did it here. I can actually go in here and edit that program as well. So jGrasp just makes it a little more user-friendly. The IDEs make it a little easier to write programs and test them and debug them and yeah, test and debug and see your output all together. But Java and jGrasp are two separate things. Java is the programming language, Java is the compiler that turns it into bytecode, and JVM is part of Java that runs the program. All right, so maybe that's enough of that, right? I think I said it 5 different ways. Here's some other popular IDEs. We use jGrasp. It's very user-friendly for beginners, and it has a great, in fact, it's a phenomenal debugger that we will see later, so it is worthwhile to use. You're welcome to use these, but it's up to you to get them to work. So just in terminology, we use GUI and terminal IO often. So this is the terminal IO screen. When I'm talking GUI, then I am talking something that's more mouse driven, right? So this terminal IO, other than closing this window, there's nothing to click in this box. So this is flat, it's terminal IO, and that's what this window down here represents. But GUI is stuff where there's lots of clickable things. So knowing those terms, I would want you to know those terms and be comfortable with those. There's some examples. These are the Microsoft Word commands that are the equivalent to some of the ones I used on my Mac. And just to go back and make sure we touch on the vocab, and then I touched, yep, I believe we touched all these, terminal IO, IDE. So usually I would want you to know that the IDE is jGrasp and what an IDE does, more than I want you to remember that it's the integrated development environment. I want you to know that GUI is the friendly, Windows-based, clickable buttons, that kind of stuff, that GUI, rather than that it stands for graphical user interface. So try to get comfortable with this terminology, and I think that's it. So nice job, happy coding. I'll see you in the next video.